Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. As you guys can tell in today's video, I'm going to be talking all about policy, current events type questions that you could be asked on your MMI. These kinds of questions really do involve having some kind of previous knowledge with current events or healthcare topics, and so it's really important to do that groundwork before you start approaching answering questions like this. So in this video, I'm going to tell you all of my resources that I use to study up on those topics, and then I'll also talk about a real example of a question that I came across in my practice questions. And so if you're interested in learning a little bit more about my approach to a policy, current events type questions, then just keep watching. Okay, so to start off, I'll give you kind of like a general structure of what a current event or a policy type question will look like. So essentially in the interview, they might ask you what your opinion is on X current event or this type of policy or this type of bill, this type of law, this kind of change to the healthcare system. And you as the applicant are expected to give an opinion. So that's why it's really important to have knowledge of current events and news kind of topics, especially at the time of your interview, so you can have some kind of knowledge when you go into those questions. That being said, did I know about every single little thing that they asked me in my MMI? No. There were times when I literally had to just rely on my innate ability to speak because I had no knowledge on something that they asked me about. And so I kind of just had to formulate my own opinion very quickly and try to see things from multiple perspectives in order to give a well-rounded answer. So if you do come across a question asking about a policy or a current event or something that you don't necessarily have a lot of knowledge about, that's okay. My advice for that is fake it till you make it. There's gonna be no way that you know about absolutely everything before you go into the MMI. It's just not humanly possible. So learn how to think on your feet. I think these current events and policy type questions are really probing applicants to make sure that they know how to think very quickly. When I practice these types of questions with my friends, I didn't let them give me any time to think about the question. I just jumped into an answer just because I wasn't sure if they would give me time to think during my MMI. If they tell you that they're going to give you like 30 seconds to a minute or however long to think about a response and then answer, definitely take the time to think, but they might not tell you if they give you time to think. You might not have any time to think, so I was just trying to be as prepared as possible, so that's why I just kind of jumped into answering the question. But I would definitely say practice thinking on your feet, because that's what these kinds of questions are trying to get at. So in terms of resources, to learn about policies, current events in healthcare, first thing I did just every morning with my breakfast, I watched the news just to see what was going on. You don't necessarily just want to focus about events in healthcare. Focus on events overall in your community, in the province, things that are just making the news. Incorporating watching the news into your morning routine or whenever it's easiest for you, I think is a really great way to get a passive influx of that kind of information in. Another thing that I did is listen to podcasts. The podcast I use is called White Coat Black Art. It's by Dr. Brian Goldman, and every week he has a new episode on a different kind of healthcare topic. With that podcast, I would make sure to pick the episodes that would be relevant to the MMI. So for example, there was an episode on Indigenous medicine, which is a huge topic in healthcare, so that would definitely be applicable. But then there might have been some other episodes about like doctors going to residency and things like that. That's not necessarily super relevant to PA school MMIs or to this kind of stage that you're at in your life. And so just make sure that you're picking and choosing the episodes that will be most relevant to your MMI. Another website that I used fairly infrequently, but I still reference it a little bit, is called Healthy Debate. This website has a ton of articles about current events in healthcare, and you can actually filter it by topic, which is really nice. So if you're sitting on the subway or you're sitting on the bus, you can read these articles. Another really good thing about brushing up on these current events, healthcare policies, changes in the healthcare system, is that you could actually incorporate what you learn from these podcasts, website, etc., into other answers. So let's say you're asked kind of a personal question that makes you think of something that you saw on the news. You can use that piece of news in that personal question or in whatever question they ask you, and that will give that answer a little bit of uniqueness to it that other applicants won't necessarily have. So make sure that you do pay attention when you're learning about these current events and you use that information to your advantage to make you unique and stand out amongst the rest. So when it comes to answering policy or current events type questions, it's really important that you establish an organized framework to follow, and that's going to help you develop your answer even when you're thinking on the spot very quickly. In these kinds of scenarios, it's very important to explore two different perspectives or give an advantage or a disadvantage to whatever policy that they're proposing, or explore multiple different perspectives in regards to a current event that you might be asked about. So I'll give you an example. So for example, let's say you're asked about your opinion on developing a privatized healthcare system in Canada. So if this was the case, you want to explore this issue or this topic through multiple different perspectives by giving a pro and giving a con. So for example, an advantage to a privatized healthcare system could be increasing the quality of healthcare that we're able to deliver to patients. When we make hospitals and clinics compete for patients and compete for revenue, we're actually incentivizing those hospitals to provide better services. When we create that competition, it allows hospitals and clinics to kind of increase their quality in order to attract patients who are now essentially customers as well. However, the big con to a private healthcare system is the fact that it can propagate a lot of socioeconomic disparities that we already see in our healthcare system, even though it's public right now. And a lot of people may not have the monetary resources to afford paying for healthcare, which could decrease their access to healthcare and ultimately increase their likelihood of developing chronic illness and chronic disease without having it managed. So as you can tell, I explored two very different perspectives on a privatized healthcare system. After you explore both of these different perspectives, which is the important part to these questions because they want to be able to see that you can think thoroughly about multiple different possibilities, you do ultimately have to answer the question that they ask you. And by doing that, you need to pick a side. Do you think a private healthcare system is good for Canadians, or whatever the question is? And then you need to give some further justification for that. But again, the most important point is exploring the different perspectives. But you need to pick a side at the end of the question because you do need to answer the question that they ask you. So for example, I could wrap up that answer by saying, after exploring all of these different avenues, ultimately I believe that a privatized healthcare system would not be good for Canadians because, as I mentioned, it can propagate socioeconomic disparities in healthcare access, it could lead to more chronic illness, etc., etc. You don't just want to repeat what you said before, you want to add some new things, but I guess my brain is not really adding any new things right now. You want to beef up that original argument a little bit. Also, depending on the amount of time that they give you to answer the question, you might be able to fit in 2 pros or 2 cons. As long as you explore both sides of the coin, you ultimately explore all the possibilities and come to a decision so you can actually answer the question that they're giving you. The name of the game to these questions, in my opinion, is just being able to think on your feet, which is really hard. So that's a skill that you should definitely practice. And by having the framework and the approach to these questions, it makes it a lot easier to jump into an answer. So restate the policy, restate the current event very, very briefly, and then move on to explore both perspectives, pros, cons, advantages, disadvantages, different stakeholders' perspectives, whatever it is. Do your exploring, do your investigating, and then ultimately answer the question and make a decision, because you do want to make sure that you answer the specific question that the evaluator is going to be asking you. And again, if you're asked about something that you don't have that much knowledge of, that's okay. We've all been there. Just make sure that you use that approach or that organization, that framework that you develop that works for you, and start going along that. And the more you practice these things, the easier they're going to get. I would say if you come across a policy or a current event type scenario that you don't know much about, that you should definitely practice that one right then and there before you go and look up the current event or the policy. That way you can just train yourself for those times that you won't necessarily have the knowledge to back it up. That definitely happened to me in my MMI. So it's definitely possible to get through these questions, but I would definitely say prepare yourself as much as possible. It's way less stressful when you actually know a lot about the topic you're being asked. So yeah, I think that's it for this one. If you guys have any more questions about this type of MMI question or anything else really related to PA school or MMI, just let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.